I'm Mark Reed Edwards, Chief Marketing Officer at HFS. Welcome to this HFS videocast of a special Fireside Chat between HFS CEO and Chief Analyst Phil Fersht and Brendan Kiely, CEO and co-founder of ThinScale Technology. Headquartered in Dublin, Ireland, ThinScale is a Deloitte Fast 50 and Fast 500 winner, and of course, the company is an HFS hot vendor. Leading the discussion, as always, is Phil Fersht. Phil founded HFS in 2010, and recently the Analyst Observatory at the University of Edinburgh recognized HFS as a leading global analyst firm, ranking HFS second in influence over enterprise buyers and second for engagement with enterprise buyers. So let me hand it over to Phil to get the discussion going. Phil, it's all yours.
There we go. Got the second best, right? Thank you for the introduction, Mark. Nice to have you, Brendan.
Good to be here, Phil.
Yeah. Tell me, we just completed some pretty in-depth research, and we sort of came away with some conclusions. This is over 2,000 employees we spoke to, both managers and employees, that the Great Resignation is kind of behind us. It's in the rearview mirror. There's a bit more engagement between staff and some of the motivations are shifting a bit in terms of what engages them, that sort of thing. But what are you seeing out there when you talk to enterprises, and you also talk a lot with the contact centers as well, Brendan, in terms of staffing trends? Is this Great Resignation really behind us? What is happening next?
So, thanks very much for having us, Phil. And we're really proud of being a hot vendor with you guys. I think CX providers and all businesses, we're entering the third wave of challenge. So the pandemic came, and there was a huge crisis around that, and the biggest challenge was getting people to work at home. After that, then I think there's a realignment going on around, you asked, is the Great Resignation over? I'm not sure it was a great resignation. I like to call it the great realization. Look, our mission is to secure the edge of the infinite workplace revolution. And I know that sounds like a really big statement, but I do see it as a revolution. And this great realization was people sitting back going, actually, for the first time in history, I don't have to work, or I don't have to live where I work. That those two things in my life can cohabitate in a very different way. And I think the Great Resignation realization was that demand from employees that I want to work differently. And the key word there, I think, is flexibility. They want flexibility. And because it's happened en masse, this has become a huge challenge for companies. So I don't think it's over. I think we're 10% into a revolution, which we're all part of defining. And I think 2023 and the coming of 2023 is going to be a key year in bolting down what we've learned, understanding what we've learned, taking new technologies, and how we make work at home and hybrid real and easy and normal. So I think if you look at CX organizations, the next wave of challenge is actually the financial dark clouds, global dark clouds that seem to be gathering. And they're gathering with pace now. And CX organizations have the challenge of having to provide more service and at the same time reduce costs. And I think, if you look at what, is required in that is giving the IT teams the agility to meet these challenges that the business keeps presenting. And they're presenting these for the reasons we talked about, these different waves of crises that keep coming. And the IT teams each time have to step up and work out how to do things different, how to do things cheaper, how to deliver for a hybrid workforce, how to do them faster, and also fundamentally how to do them securely. So if you take one of the big things we deliver is cost and cost reduction. And, we're almost, assisting companies in that transition from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things.
So what is it that employees want? And we talk about remote security and BYOD and that sort of thing, but what is this in terms of benefiting the employee? Why should they be excited about this?
Well, I think that if you look at it from the employee's perspective, going back to what I said at the top of the call, flexibility is what they want, and that, you know, that cohabitation of their work and their life balance, and to truly achieve that. So hybrid, you know, it's important to have a seamless user experience across the locations. So whether that's on a BYOD device or indeed on a corporate device, it's very important that, you know, from day one, their experience in terms of coming on board and through the onboarding process is seamless in terms of user experience, and also in terms of their ability to access what they need. From the employer's perspective, from the CX provider's perspective, you know, in the past, work from home machines were basically just out there in the wild, and we provide the insight that they're able to understand what's going on with those machines, that they're able to patch those machines and manage those machines, whether it's a corporate machine, and ultimately secure those machines, whether it's a corporate or a BYOD machine, and that they can have the same user experience at home if they're in a hybrid context as they would in the office, both for the IT manager, but also for the employee.
Yeah, so, you know, our research showed that we just finished across 2,000 employees, actually showed one thing which was of real interest to us, which was technology. Their technology experience is the second major factor in whether they stay or leave an employer. So how would a solution like ThinScale improve that experience for the employee and not just the employer?
So if you look at some of our customers at the moment, what they're doing is they validate the machine within the hiring process with our validation tool. And that means when the employee shows up on day one, everything works. There's nothing worse than starting a job and you haven't got a machine for a week. And when you do get on, there's multiple passwords, etc. So we manage that whole security piece and that whole user experience piece right at the beginning. And then, you know, from the perspective of the BYOD machine, we've had customers whereby it may take 6 weeks to get a corporate machine out. So what they do is they set them up on BYOD, they get them working from day one, but then over time they may decide to send out a corporate machine if that employee is going to stay, or they want the employee to have a different experience. So even within that, they're saving a lot of money, because we have a lot of CX providers who would, you know, somebody starts, they send them out a machine. Sometimes they don't even start, so that machine has to be sent back. And we all know how hard it is to get all those machines back. So, and I think, look, as well, from a security perspective, you know, we deliver the peace of mind to IT teams, you know, to give them that visibility and control over endpoints in a work at home environment, whether it's a corporate machine or a BYOD machine.
Are you seeing unprecedented demand for what you're doing? I mean, we're obviously seeing security as the #1 issue affecting leadership challenges right now, but it's not the #1 issue in terms of investment. So people talk about it, they worry about it, but they don't quite know how to handle it. So do you feel there's a big gap between leadership embracing better security partners and actually doing things, or do you see this gap closing now?
Probably a bit of both. But I think if you step back, why does that gap exist in the first place? And I think there's a lot of confusion around the changing state of security. And really, this is marked by the nation state actors moving into this area. That's the truth of it. And, you know, locking down endpoints has to be table stakes. That's what we see it as. So yes, the gap, I think, is closing. I think if you look at, again, stepping back, you look at the rise of the CISO, you know, as a role within organizations. If you look at the implications of GDPR, PCI, HIPAA, and if you're not compliant, you know, the costs that you can rack up from that. And more than 50% of all cyber attacks are typically traced back, to failure to update applications and software with the right patches. These are actually easy things to achieve, and we help companies achieve that with our device management, which will be scaling up in the near future in terms of the capabilities of device management at the endpoint. So the idea is to try and simplify how they deliver, but also enhance the security and also reduce costs at the same time. And that's achieved through a multiplicity of things, automation, also understanding the operational implications of hybrids and the security implications of that it is very different to locking down and securing an environment in an office and only having secure in the office. So the gap is closing. I think there are certain organizations who probably haven't fully grasped the importance of the need to always be reviewing your security posture. You're never fully secure. I think that's something that we have to embrace and see it as a constant moving thing that has to be reinterpreted and reassessed on an ongoing basis. And I think there's a huge amount of focus around the cloud. And I mean, even, if you look at from a European perspective, Phil, there's going to be a security certificate regulation coming from the EU that you will have to get certified for your cloud. So this is going to become a much broader geopolitical issue as well. And that is due to the nation state actors coming. So those items will change the context in how C-suites think about security, the importance of it. And I think that they're the things that will close that gap that you talked about.
Yeah. And how do you help them securely manage customer data and employee data? I mean, this is the big problem right now, is where is data housed? How is it secured? How do we test? That penetration testing is huge now. I mean, you can't even get bills paid by certain corporates unless you have a penetration testing certificate, all that sort of stuff, right?
Sure.
So how do you play into the privacy and security of the data that the employees are accessing?
So our software completely locks down the endpoint when they're using it. So they have no access to their personal machine. They can't copy and paste. They can't have even if there's a screen scraper on before they log on, it can't get into the secure area. And really, they can't. It's not a container, but they can't take anything outside the environment, if that makes sense. So that's the first key thing. I think the other aspect is then when they're inside, if they're a bad actor, we would have various things there that would ensure that so that the data remains secure. And talking about penetration testing, but we've a never-ending cycle on it, and that's back to that moving thing all the time, that you have to be looking at the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah, my brother-in-law runs a call center, and I don't know if it's ThinScale he uses, but he uses some device and it drives him nuts because he can't use his Facebook or anything.
That's probably us. There's whitelisting. So if people want their employees to be on Facebook, that's no problem. One of the things we've really tried to build into our products is giving that flexibility to the IT administrators, that they decide what their posture is and that they're able to achieve that posture with our software through multiple checkboxes and things that they can do to achieve that. Yeah.
It's also, you got to figure out employees, should they manage their personal digital life separate from their professional digital life, because they get very, especially during pandemic, they got very, very blended, and now people are pulling back a bit from this.
And that's the key. That's the key thing, Phil, that the Secure Remote Worker, our BYOD solution, solves. So it is an application that sits on the personal machine. They can use their personal machine. Once they go into Secure Remote Worker, they're temporarily completely locked out of their personal machine. They can only access what their employer wants them to access, and that once they log off, the application disengages and they have their own personal PC. Whereas to contrast that on the corporate machines, our Thin Kiosk product, it locks down that machine completely, and you can't get to the C drive in any way, shape, or form. You can only access all the time what your employer wants you to access.
I mean, it seems to me that this should be every company is, well, most companies now have hybrid work and have this issue, whether they're a call center or a service center or whatever, right? In terms of being able to partition what is corporate versus what is personal.
There's some customers who put secure remote worker on a corporate machine because they want to allow their employees use the corporate machine for personal reasons. So when they do their work, they do it inside secure remote worker. And when they do the personal stuff, they do it outside. So that means then they're only carrying one device if they're traveling. And I always remember being at a C-suite meeting, and I made that point, and somebody in the room said, well, we don't allow our employees use their corporate machine for personal reasons. And the CTO very nicely put up his hand and said, I use my corporate machine for personal reasons. And if I am, everybody else is. So, you can have a policy, but you're very dependent on the employees to follow that policy. Whereas if you can force the policy through how they access the apps on the machine, it's a much safer way of doing it. Well, Phil, you had a lot of talks with the organizations that we would deal with, particularly around the award. What was kind of the particular aspects of our technology that stood out that the researchers decided to include us as a hot vendor?
I think a lot of it was around the applicability to a major industry, rather than just sort of saying here's a general security BYOD product. I think it was very tailored for the CX space and an understanding of the needs of the CX space in terms of, they would roll on, roll off staff. They would have staff with their own personal devices, staff with their own corporate devices. The fact that you get hybrid, you get the EX, CX components of the industry, and you have something that's very plug and play, very immediate for their needs versus something that's very complicated and it's going to take an awful long time for them to implement. So I think speed of implementation, we had positive feedback from clients that were using it, obviously from the hot vendor process, and very, very relevant and ahead of its time, to be honest with you. I think what you're doing is very, very relevant now, even more so than ever. And then now we're seeing a lot more gig work starting to happen, different types of work that the CX firms are dealing with. We're also seeing a lot more of the staffing firms getting into CX, getting into tech. So I think, you're in a good place to keep evolving what you do to be very, very relevant. And honestly, this is the era of services. It's got a $1.7 trillion market and growing. And with the inflation in wages we're seeing now, the talent resource thing that's going on, I can only see this going in one direction. So you're in a good spot.
No, that's first of all, thanks for those insights. I mean, I think, something that we focused on is really reducing that time from sale to seat, so getting agents onboarded and trained and into production, faster is absolutely crucial. So from when a CX operator closes the deal, how can they get that first employee up and running on that contract, and how do you narrow the gap at that time? But yeah, so that's something we've been focusing on a lot. And on the issue of services, I agree with you. I think you said earlier in our conversation the need to everything's moving so fast. The need to have specialization out-house as well as in-house is going to increase rapidly over the next period of time. So I would definitely agree with you on that. It's exciting times ahead, Phil. Exciting times.
Okay, well, it's been a pleasure meeting you, Brendan, and I look forward to keeping close to your product, and look forward to the next time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks,
Scott.
Phil. Thanks, Phil and Brendan, for an enlightening discussion. To learn more about HFS, head over to hfsresearch.com, where you can view most of our research for free. Plus, we have a growing library of videocasts just like this one that you can take with you wherever you go. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next HFS videocast.